Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Okay, I'm turning it off, or do you want to mute it there? Ring back. Hare Krishna. You can mute there instead of turning off here.
Hare Krishna.
Is this okay for the camera? This height? Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This morning we're covering the final verse of this whole section of Srimad Bhagavatam. And at least it looks like this evening and tomorrow morning we'll be able to cover the balance, that is the teachings from Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta about lessons and benefits from the whole Putana Lila. This verse, this morning's verse, as you see on the screen, there's Maharaj Parikshit hearing from Shukadeva Goswami, and Shukadeva Goswami is going to give some glorification of this pastime and in general hearing Krishna's pastimes. There's great benefit, and let's hear what Shukadeva Goswami has to say. Any person who hears with faith and devotion about how Krishna, the Supreme Personality Godhead, killed Putana, and who thus invests his hearing in such childhood pastimes of Krishna, certainly attains attachment for Govinda, the Supreme, original person. Well, that's a nice benediction, isn't it? And who thus invests his hearing in such childhood pastimes of Krishna, certainly attains attachment for Govinda, the Supreme Original Person. Prabhupada's purport: the incident in which the great witch attempted to kill the child but was killed herself is certainly wonderful. Therefore, this verse uses the word adbhutam, meaning specifically wonderful. Krishna has left us many wonderful narrations about him. Simply by reading these narrations as they are described in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one gains salvation from this material world and gradually develops attachment to and devotion for Govinda, Adipurusha. Very nice. Here's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writing something quite similar. He who hears with faith the childhood pastimes of Krishna, Krishna's Yar Bhakam, and the liberation of Putana, and takes them as most astonishing, attains attraction for Govinda. An alternative reading for Srinuyat, or hears, is Nishamya, or hearing. Taking that reading, let us take the meaning, namely, he who, hearing the childhood pastimes of Krishna and the liberation of Putana with faith, attains attraction for Govinda, then attains attraction for everything related to Govinda. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And here's Jiva Goswami commenting. By hearing the astonishing story of how Krishna gave himself to Putana merely because she had some relationship with him, all people will develop rati for the Lord. This word rati, our acharyas use practically synonymous with bhava, because so other was spoken of attachment, and here it's bhava, asakti and bhava. Any person subject to death, that's all of us, who hears the astonishing childhood activities of Krishna will develop attraction to Govinda, Lord of Gokula. Without investigating the meaning further, this statement glorifies the power of objects related to the Lord. Now, Jiva Goswami continues, on investigating, however, one can understand there is a quick attainment of results from considering the special mercy. Well, that prompts the question, what's that? By the liberation of Putana, she went beyond samsara and material enjoyment. It is astonishing, because without giving up his infant condition, Krishna killed and delivered Putana. Another version has nishamya instead of shrinuyat, that is, hearing this story attentively, a person develops rati, along with faith. Sridhar Swami does not accept this, however, since he gives the meaning, quote, anyone who hears this story with faith develops rati for Govinda. Still, that's Jiva Goswami commenting. Now, in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings, we know this. He accepted Sridhar Swami's commentary as authoritative. Sridhar Swami lived some time before Lord Chaitanya appeared, and he was a celebrated commentator on Srimad Bhagavatam. When Jiva Goswami wrote the Sandarbhas, the 6 Sandarbhas, in the very beginning, early section, he explains, like a scholar will do, what's his objective, the methodology he'll follow to achieve the objective, and the primary sources that he's going to rely upon to achieve that objective. So when he identifies the primary sources, he speaks specifically, of course, of Srimad Bhagavatam, and he then mentions the commentator Sridhar Swami by name, and Ramanujacharya by name, and Madhvacharya by name. And when he speaks of Sridhar Swami, he makes, because he's the principal commentator in Srimad Bhagavatam, he's a follower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so he's going to follow Sridhar Swami's commentary, and he remarks those portions that conform with Vaishnava understanding. And here's a detail. It's not in Tattva Sandarbha itself, but commentary on Tattva Sandarbha. And that is like a little history of Sridhar Swami. He was a sannyasi in the Shankaracharya line. He knew that Shankaracharya was familiar with Srimad Bhagavatam because Shankaracharya wrote 8 verses, some ashtakam, that are glorifying Krishna, and it's specifically indicating pastimes that occur only in the Bhagavatam. So his scholarly followers knew. He knew Srimad Bhagavatam. And he had affection, appreciation for Srimad Bhagavatam. So Sridhar Swami put two and two together and said, the followers of Shankaracharya will be interested in Srimad Bhagavatam, and they may make a twisted, convoluted, totally terrible commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. So I want to make a commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam that is devotional. However, because the readership, one of the audiences that I'm interested in communicating with or reaching out to is the followers of Shankara. So if it's 10% Vaishnava, then they won't be interested. So therefore, consciously, he included some things that could be rendered as by impersonalists as, see, it confirms our Shankaracharya's view. There are some passages there in Sridhar Swami's commentary that are like that. And I'm not so familiar with which ones. If that question comes up, I don't have that detail. But largely, primarily, it's a Vaishnava rendering, and very excellently done rendering of Srimad Bhagavatam and its meanings. So Jiva Goswami was very aware of all of what I just said, and so he's making reference to Sridhar Swami's commentary, because he's like, the beacon in the darkness of this age of Kali, to get light from the Srimad Bhagavatam properly. So he makes reference to him regularly. At the same time, there are other than Sridhar Swami understandings, legitimate Vaishnava proper understandings of the Bhagavatam, and from time to time he'll not oppose Sridhar Swami because he's very respectful, but he'll indicate, another meaning is this, something like that. So carrying on, this is still Jiva Goswami. He writes the verse that you see up above, avidyaya shayad eva labhyoham iti tan mayim. The Lord, with the thought, quote, a person can attain me when their ignorance is destroyed, first killed Putana, who was absorbed in him just as Rama previously killed Tadaka, or we normally are hearing Tataka, but you see the Sanskrit, it's Tadakam. So there we are. One of the messages we heard very early in the presentation. One of the first demons, not the first demon killed by Ram was a woman, the first demon killed by Krishna was a woman. They have some similarity, and that similarity is he, the personality of Godhead, Krishna, wanted to deliver Putana. We can infer that Rama also wanted to deliver Tataka. But to deliver them, first, they had to purify. A person can attain me when their ignorance is destroyed. First killed Putana, who was absorbed in him, just as Ram previously killed Tadaka. And he concludes his commentary on this verse. At the beginning of the pastimes, Krishna accepted Putana as a nurse. In this way, Krishna made the devotees thirsty for his quality of sweetness. By hearing the story, they developed faith. Then, rati, or bhava. progressively. So now we're going to hear the last section for this morning. This is Sanatana Goswami's commentary on this verse. What can be said about Putana attaining liberation by the power of Krishna, by his drinking her milk? By hearing the story, all people attain prema for Krishna. Any human who hears this story develops prema for Krishna. This discards any qualification. Any human can hear with faith. Since he gave the goal to wicked Putana, he naturally gives to the person with a wealth of bhakti, considering the greatness of his mercy. Paragraph. Another version has nishamya instead of shrinuyat. They all make this comment. Hearing this story, a human endowed with faith develops prema. Or he who is endowed with faith attains rati. Or the person who is endowed with faith attains a position beyond death, amartyaha. He escapes samsara. Sridhar Swami does not accept this version, since he does not explain it. Now go back because this is distracting. Jiva Goswami was the nephew and thus younger than Sanatana Goswami. Rupa Goswami, although generally accepted as the next in the line after Lord Chaitanya, he looked up to Sanatana Goswami and considered him not only his elder brother, but his guru, or one of his gurus, Shiksha Guru. Then what to speak of Jiva Goswami? Jiva Goswami was the Diksha disciple of Jiva and the Shiksha disciple of Jiva, who looked up to Sanatana Goswami, so he also certainly looked up to Sanatana Goswami. And Sanatana Goswami wrote commentary before Jiva Goswami wrote his commentary. So we find a lot similarities in their commentaries. Naturally so. Differences? Naturally so. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur came many generations later, and he displays freedom, while at the same time he displays fidelity. So he expresses things and indicates things that are not found within their commentary. He doesn't contradict, but he has his realizations and his expressions that are not 100% the same as the predecessor acharyas, but they're faithful to the predecessor acharyas, and they're all faithful to Sridhar Swami because Lord Chaitanya was. So they all look up to Sridhar Swami way up there. And of course, everything is dedicated to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Everything is dedicated to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because the teachings of Krishna within the Srimad Bhagavatam are the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to the world. Lord Chaitanya is simply explaining and exhibiting symptoms of bhakti that are found within this 10th canto. And of course, supported by the whole rest of the Bhagavatam in so many wonderful ways. So that this final verse is describing, just to summarize again, the value and the importance of hearing with faith. there's whether we can understand or not understand is not the essential. Understandings may come, understandings may not so quickly come. That's not the criterion. The criterion is making the Krishna connection, cleansing misgivings and awakening attraction, and then attachment, and then ecstasy, and then prema, like Rupa Goswami has given the sequence. It's a certainty, hearing with faith. The bhakti process has been described, Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur describes, as simply stages of faith. There's all the way from adau shraddha, or preliminary faith, up to prema, and it's just stages of faith. Or say it the other way, preliminary faith is just the seed of prema. So you can look at it either way. But faith is important. And faith doesn't mean blind. Faith means some confidence, particularly confidence in the source, the reliability of the source. This is one of the descriptions of pramana, understanding things from a reliable source. And Srimad Bhagavatam is, according to our line of disciplic succession, detailed by Jiva Goswami. Srimad Bhagavatam is the most reliable source to know about anything, but especially to know about transcendence, to know about adhokshaja, that which is beyond the sense perception and the mind's reasoning capacity. It must come from that aparusheya shabda praman. So we have, based upon, that's our faith. Our faith is resting on Scripture, the authoritative Scripture. Most authoritative is Srimad Bhagavatam. So hearing with that faith, not what it's not, we've already said, not just something blind, or there's very careful consideration that goes into where we should invest our faith. If time permits, I'm hoping today to provide a little explanation of, other than Shabda Pramana, when Jiva Goswami, this is a detail, when Jiva Goswami writes Tattva Sandarbha, the first of the 6 Sandarbhas, the first section of Tattva Sandarbha is Pramana Kanda. The section that deals with Pramana. How do we know about Krishna? By some means of evidence. So he gives, aside from the 3 that we're familiar with, sense perception, reason, and Shabda Pramana, sound, he explains there's mundane knowledge that must come from a reliable source. Like, what time is it right now? Different. So what's the definitive way of understanding what time it is right now? Or, whatever. You want to know what's the temperature out? Or does somebody have COVID-19? There has to be a reliable source of understanding anything. And when one hears from that reliable source, then you can know one way or the other. But if you don't have a reliable source, then you're not sure. So I'm just making the point. Even in worldly dealings, we're relying on Shabda. And then there's Oparusheya Shabda, that's from the perfect person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. We're hearing from him. That's the Vedic authority rests upon where it comes from. So the Vedas are authority because It comes from the perfect person. When Jiva Goswami outlines the three, he very interestingly adds 7 more because he's such a scholar. And then commentary says, actually, the 7 more are just subsets of those 3. You with me? So the one that corresponds with Shabda is, I forget the term, atiya, something like that. Or another, a more conventional term is loka pramana. Loka pramana is like worldly sound. And when there's worldly sound, like, what's the temperature? Does somebody have COVID-19? It's still a sound vibration. It's knowing through hearing a valid source. Then you can accept this is what it is. Then when it comes to transcendence, interestingly, there are things about transcendence that we don't find in authorized scripture. And some things we accept, although it's not found in authorized scripture. I'll give 2 examples. And I'm going to make a little document to put in writing what I'm expressing now. I mentioned this yesterday, I think. On Gopastami, the pastime of Radharani dressing up like like Subal, so she can go meet Krishna. She puts on a dhoti. She wears Subal's clothes and carries a calf to cover the front part of her body so she can pass by her mother-in-law, and mother-in-law doesn't know it's Radha. She thinks it's Subal. So in our ISKCON centers all over the world, many, that's celebrated. Now, it's not in scripture, but it's celebrated. So what's the authority? That's the basis for it being accepted. Gaudiya Vaishnavas all over the place for generations and generations have accepted it. So we accept it, although it's not in scripture. It's Shabda that's not in scripture. It doesn't have the same weight as that which is in scripture, but it's accepted. There's another example, second example, mentioned the other day also in one of the classes, the How Bilal story. Do you know the How Bilal story? No. There's a document. I'll put it together and send it out. But in Nandagram, Krishna was young, and he liked to play. Little boys like to play. So he would play with his friends. And sometimes they get so involved in playing, they wouldn't come home for lunch. No, because generally lunch is they're out taking care of the calves, but sometimes, at least this particular expression is, they were playing with their friends, Balaram, Krishna. And so Mother Yasoda's cooking, she sent Rohini, go get them. They didn't come. She said, you have to go get them. They won't listen to me. So Mother Yasoda went, and they wouldn't listen to Mother Yasoda because they were too occupied playing. One version says, some of the boys said, if you leave, we won't play with you tomorrow. So they didn't leave. So then Mother Yasoda became clever and said, the How Bilal will come and get you. I said, what's the How Bilal? And she described How Bilal. It's, just made up some name. Big teeth and furry and roars, and they like to eat little children. We never heard of How Bilal. They just kept playing. So Mother Yasoda points and says, look, how below? I'm getting out of here. And she started running. And then he started following her without looking back to see what is how below following us or not. It was a trick to get them to come have lunch. So this is by the side of Yasoda Kund, which is at Nandagram, on the certain area around Nandagram. And there's little carvings of how below. It's not in scripture, but everyone accepts it. At least all the Brijbasis and Gaudiya Acharyas and everybody accepts it. Not in scripture. Over the generations and generations, it's come to be accepted. So we accept it. And then it gets into gray areas, and then it gets into black areas. Gray areas is somebody heard something somewhere. They heard a class or something, and somebody said something, and then they start repeating that something that doesn't have that same gravity of over generations and generations, and many Vaishnavas accept. And then there's stories about Krishna and Balaram and Ramchandra and this one, that one, that don't have any authority at all. Somebody said something, wrote something, and then devotees have a tendency to pick up and be eager to hear something new, something new. My concern is, let it be rooted in Shabda, that's primarily a Parushaya Shabda, or the other kind of Shabda, because that's the one of the 10. But these other ones, it's just sound vibration. I heard it somewhere. Somebody said in a class. I get it all the time. Is this true? So I'm explaining, according to Jiva Goswami's Tattva Sandarbha, we don't accept those things. Unless we can, it's very clear, it has, although the source may be unknown, it's generally accepted amongst the great acharyas. When we hear Prabhupada speaking about Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna is the personality of Godhead, over and over, the authorities accept it. And list the authorities that accept Bhagavad Gita. It's authoritative, confirmed by all these great authorities, and list the great authorities that accept Bhagavad Gita is authoritative, or Krishna is the personality of Godhead. Here is accepted. It's in the scripture and is accepted by these authorities. So, by hearing this story, that's what's on the screen, by hearing this story, they develop faith, and then rati. We hear the story with faith. What's the basis of that faith? It's Shabda Pramana, Aparushaya Shabda Pramana. And that Aparushaya Shabda Pramana is accepted by all great authorities. That's the basis of hearing with faith. Whether we can understand it all or not understand it. Some persons have commented in the course of these exchanges, I don't understand all this, or there's portions of the scripture that's just baffling, and do I have to understand all this to go back to Godhead, and those kinds of questions. We have to hear with faith, whether we can understand or not understand. And the result of hearing with faith is faith becomes nourished, and one gradually attains higher stages, attachment, rati, and prema. It leads to higher stages of bhakti. Just hear with faith. Understand, don't understand. Hear with faith. And what's the basis of that faith? That was that little discussion just before. It's faith with authority, as opposed to faith that's blind and improperly reposed faith. That's, the whole Putana thing. the cheating that we're going to hear starting tonight. What's the lesson for us from this Putana pastime? Okay, let's see if there's some discussion. You're on.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So that statement, by hearing this story, they develop faith and then rati. So this, what I'm understanding is that even though I don't have faith, but by hearing this story, because it's coming from the proper source, then because of that, my faith strengthens.
Well, not exactly. There's faith, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So it says faith will develop. You can add it, further. There has to be faith to hear. Preliminary faith at least. Otherwise you'd be off doing something else.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't take the position I have no faith, because it's not true.
Yeah. Okay. And so I'm the misplaced faith. I'm the so much of the unauthorized sources that are available on the internet. People are just going here and there. And
Yes,
then,
therefore we want to have Prabhupada's books widely distributed, because the longer it takes for people to get Prabhupada's books, the more their brains are going to get scrambled.
so rather than the books, the sources for hearing this, suppose someone wants to hear, the hearing is, the improper sources of hearing is abundant on the internet. And
Is what?
Abundant
Abundant.
on the internet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but so the authorized sources are also abundant.
Abundant, yeah. So this is making them available is the...
Yes. Here, just a little, two little stories. One story is, I heard this somewhere, I can't remember exactly where. Somebody, their mother is from somewhere, Karnataka, I think, and from childhood her mother would read the Bhagavatam every day, and read the Bhagavatam every day, and read the Bhagavatam. She read the Bhagavatam, umpteen times. And then their daughter became a devotee, ISKCON devotee. So their daughter sent their mother Bhagavatam in their mother tongue. And then her mother wrote back to the daughter, I read this every day for so many hours, and for the first time I'm understanding the Bhagavatam. Faith in the message without understanding it. Getting something, because otherwise how can you do something for your whole life unless there's some faith? And there's other examples. People that have lived in a monastery for their whole life, coming across, searching for God, and living, monastic lifestyle, hearing Prabhupada's teachings, receiving Bhagavad Gita's message, understanding for the first time. So, some preliminary faith, but then hearing from authorized sources, faith develops, and then rati. It's 35,000 feet view, but the principle is clear. Okay? Yes, over here.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
The green button.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I think yesterday you also talked about the samsara liberation when you were referring about the gopis.
I spoke about what?
Samsara liberation.
Samsara liberation.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you were talking about the gopis,
They went beyond that.
They were doing the samsara, but with the attachment to the Krishna on it.
Yeah.
And today also you were referring the killing of Putana, and during the killing, the samsara liberation, hearing the Putana story, this can be achieved on it. So we are also in real world trying to attain the samsara liberation. So how, I think only the attachment to the Krishna, that should be the primary goal.
Yes. Yes. Because it's like Prabhupada's very easy to understand statement. If you have $1 million, you have your $10 and $100 problem solved. That's easy to understand. So beyond samsara liberation is attachment to Krishna. So our goal is to become attached to Krishna. Maya saktak manak partha. Maicha nanya yogena. Becoming attached. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Something further.
Yeah. Another related question on it, Maharaj. I think in most of the Prabhupada's books on it, it says that you just read the books on it. You don't have to understand anything. Still, you get liberated.
Well, I don't know if that's this more consistent message is try to understand. Whether you understand or don't understand, try to understand. It has to do with the inquisitive spirit, Brahma Jigyasa. So when you're hearing with the I want to know, it's not an academic no, it's a spiritual no. So try to understand in that way. Because when we try to understand with the academic way, we won't understand. It'll continue to be puzzling. The ascending process is not going to reach understanding. But still trying to understand, and you go the descending process. And then that is encouraged. Try to understand. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
No, right next to you. He wants.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So you said about the Shabda Pramana and Loka Pramana, correct? So for both of things to understand, means the faith is the primary things we have in equal magnitude, or?
Well, faith is primary, yes. Discrimination is also. We should discriminate between what are authorized sources and what are not authorized sources. Whether it's, that aparushaya shabda praman or loka praman is something that's from scripture. I mean, like, here's an example. You grew up in India, so you're well aware. I didn't, so I wasn't well aware. I just knew there's Valmiki Ramayana. That's all I knew. And then I read the Bhagavatam, where Shukadeva Goswami says to Maharaj Parikshit, Canto 9, there are many versions of Ramayana. I was unfamiliar what those many versions of Ramayana are. And he says, I'll only speak from the authoritative ones, which means there's some non-authoritative ones. So that was a little light went on. And then further, spending time in Ram's places of pastimes, Ayodhya, etc., I came to understand what are some of there's a number of authorized Ramayanas, and so it's the same criterion of what's authorized. Our acharyas accept them. Consistently they accept them. Without going into details, there's lots of details. And then there's others that they don't accept, and so they don't carry the same weight. And if there's some variation on the theme of one that doesn't carry the same weight, at least my discerning process, because there's faith and there's discerning, I just don't go there. I'm not interested to hear more and try to understand. I try to understand where there's authority behind it. So both things. Faith doesn't mean you switch your intelligence off. You just have faith. Blind faith. No. It's not just intelligence. Leave faith over there and just like use your discerning capacity. No. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Here we go. We're going to do some online ones. That's you? Sachi Kumar? Or? Okay.
This is from Lileshwari Mataji. She sent yesterday, but
Okay,
after that.
fine.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Guru Maharaj, you mentioned that witches like Putana exist now also. I am also aware of people worshipping witches and doing black magic. My question is, when someone sends these types of witches against devotees, will the devotees get affected, especially when the devotees are in the neophyte stage of bhakti? What can devotees do to protect themselves from these types of demoniac forces?
Get inoculated. My understanding from Prabhupada about this topic, not specifically witches, but anything that's, in the tamasic realm, let's say, disease, what determines whether, if one is exposed to some disease, whether one will contract the disease or not contract the disease? And the Prabhupada's answer is no, it's not karma. Rather, if your resistance is low, you'll contract the disease. And if your resistance is high, you won't contract the disease. Let's take the example, because we already discussed it, about ghosts. Then we'll go to witches, because they're in similar, darkness category. If one has faith in the holy name and calls sincerely the holy name, the ghosts cannot affect you. And so the answer to her question is similarly with ghosts, with witches. It's black or it's tamasic, and you're protected if you have shelter in the holy name and shelter in your attachment to Krishna. They can't affect you. They can't affect you. Now, if one's resistance is low, then one may be affected or infected. That's my answer. That's it? More?
This question is there are 3 questions from Taruni Radha Mataji. First one is, since the Vrajavasis experience Krishna's childhood pastime, including that of a newborn baby, does this help their consciousness to always see him as their little one, despite all the display of wonderful pastimes? Like in the mundane world, even if a child grows up to be a president, for the child's mother and father, he or she is still their beloved little child.
Similar, yes. However, it's not dependent. Their affection for Krishna as their child is not dependent upon the little childhood pastimes that he performed in Braja. They have that affection naturally anyway. His pastimes nourish that affection, but that affection is there anyway. So there's similarity, but it's not a one-to-one comparison.
And Taruni Radha Mataji's second question is, Lord Brahma goes through austerities to be born as 4 hills of Varshana so that he can get the dust of the Vrajavasis. So when we see Brahma getting bewildered, who is this Brahma? Is it an expansion of Brahma?
No, same Brahma.
Her third question is, does the duplicitous nature in my heart get destroyed by hearing this pastime, or does it only destroy the anartha of getting a false teacher and false teachings from them?
Everything depends upon the quality of one's hearing. And the consistency of that quality of hearing. So duplicity within one's heart can also be destroyed depending upon the quality of hearing. And same with, false teachers and false teachings. One may hear, it happens, one may hear somebody is speaking such and such katha. And if one has properly reposed their faith in sources, they may rule out hearing from some other sources, such and such sources, because the authoritative nature of such and such sources is questionable, dubious. So they don't hear from those sources. One is protected by the quality of one's hearing from a proper source.
And next question is from Ratnavali Mataji. How to deal with the deception thinking within myself? I think I'm very attentive while listening the lecture, but miss some important points. Sometimes I don't get the gist, even if I listen the same lectures many times. What to do?
Well, that's not deception. That I listen to a lecture many times and I don't understand it properly. I know that I'm not understanding it properly. That's not deception. But the answer to the other part of her question is what to do. You go on hearing with faith. And the success is not that you've understood everything. That would be a material standard. And we don't have material standards. The spiritual standard is faith is developed by faithful hearing. And the little by little, according to what Krishna wants to disclose, Krishna discloses. And then one can understand. But the goal is not just getting an understanding. We want to understand. That was our prior question. Try to understand. But the trying to understand fruit is that faith is growing, attachment is growing, rati is growing, prema is growing. That's the standard. Understand or not understand. Let's look at Mother Jasoda. What did she not understand? Lots of things. But she was on the prema platform. That's the goal. So don't worry about the material standard is you get an A in your exam because you could give answers to this and that. This isn't that kind of material academic knowledge. The A in your exam is you become attached to Krishna. And your faith grows in the stages already mentioned.
The next question is from Vilasa Manjari Mataji. When we are hearing, doesn't our faith also depend on speaker's faith in scriptures?
Yes. Yes. And then faith can be nourished and grow, expand.
So it's like transfer of faith to me.
Transfer?
Yeah, because sometimes I feel faith. Sometimes I feel faith because of speaker's faith. It is like transfer of their faith to me.
Sure.
Is this kind of faith genuine and
Yes.
permanent?
You stand next to fire, you get warm. It's genuine. You're warm. That's it.
No more. The next question is from Sridevi Kosuri Mataji. This is Shriya Devidasi, sorry. In Srimad Bhagavatam, we read that unfortunately people in this age, especially persons who are of demoniac nature, want to be cheated.
Want to be teachers. Yeah.
Want to be cheated.
Cheated. Oh,
Thus, Supreme Personality of Godhead sends great cheaters. As I understand, people in this age are more with ignorance. How do I understand that Lord sends more cheaters?
he's just reciprocating with living entities. He doesn't want to, but they want. And he reciprocates. He's advising, don't. And they're saying, I want. Don't. I want. All right.
The next question is from Amara Mataji. She has 2 questions from yesterday evening. First question. You kindly mentioned that killing of demons is incidental and love of Rajavasis is real purpose of Krishna. My question is, why and how Krishna's killing of demons was so popularized rather than his love and mercy?
Because they're not hearing from proper sources. And people like, combat. They don't necessarily like love of God.
And the second question is, Arjuna and Maharaj Parikshit have made many philosophical inquiries, and on the other hand, Brajavasis did not ask anything. What is the difference between their positions, and what best can we take from both examples?
We're sadhakas. We're not Brijbasis. So we're hearing from the discussions between Arjuna and Krishna and Maharaj Parikshit and Shukadev Goswami. That's our sadhana. And in our sadhana, we are encouraged to understand, like the prior discussion, try to understand. So there's Krishna Tattva is being presented through that sound, and we're being encouraged to try to understand Krishna Tattva. And Krishna Tattva includes the Aishvarya and the Madhurya feature. That's all part of Krishna Tattva. And if that day comes when we develop love like the residents of Vrindavan for Krishna, Krishna may choose to cover us with Yogamaya and we start asking all these questions. No, they don't. They also are speculating, who is this? We even starting with Putana, what to speak of all the rest. They ask, but they don't reach the conclusion that he's the personality of Godhead because it's blocked by the Lord's Yogamaya potency. Okay?
Then Amara Mataji has a question from today morning class. Can we hear from a source where one is glorifying Krishna even if the source is unknown?
You tapped into the very message I was trying to share. And my short reply is, if you can understand that the message being presented from the source that's unknown, or someone is speaking, let's say, a Krishna story or a Ram Lila story or something, that you accept the person and the sources that that person is drawing from, then yet you can hear. And if you don't have a positive answer to that question, I don't advise that you hear. There's so much opportunity here where it's really clear. The medium is transparent and the source is worthy of hearing from. Then you hear. And otherwise, use your hearing capacity in a better way, because otherwise you become bewildered in all kinds of things, and it happens all the time. All the time. People read in the Chitra comic books, or the kids view, some cartoon of something, and they grow up with the cartoon something idea. And then when they read the Bhagavatam, it bounces because they got, filled up with a wrong idea. And they struggle. So that's, even for children, or, big children naming adults that think they know, it becomes more difficult to understand because they already think they know. They heard from childhood something. And then they hear the Bhagavatam. It's like, what? So be careful. Be same as the point made earlier today, this morning class. Be careful. Be circumspect. What's the source that you're hearing from?
The next question is from Kasturi Manjari Mataji. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Thinking about Sanatan Goswami using diplomacy to be released from the jail of Nawab Hussain Shah. How do we distinguish between deceit or duplicity and diplomacy?
You read in Chaitanya Charitamrita purport where Srila Prabhupada gives a very succinct answer to that question. I think I can summarize it, but I recommend that you read that purport. The interest of Krishna is to be served. And generally speaking, we don't have the capacity to make that discernment when it's okay to use duplicity like Sanatan Goswami used duplicity. We don't have the acumen, we don't have the adhikar, we don't have the capacity. So don't. That's generally don't. But when is it acceptable? When it's for the pleasure and satisfaction and reaching Krishna, then it's acceptable. But read the language in that purport from Chaitanya Charitamrita to get it precise.
There's one more question from Vilasa Manjari Mataji. To what extent I should be in the mood of verifying the scriptures what I hear? Some devotees I don't need to verify with scriptures because I have faith. How about others, like somewhat unknown?
Be vigilant, please. I really don't want to get into it. There are some popular speakers that I don't listen to, and if somebody asks me, I'll advise them don't listen to, because they say things that are just completely not within the context of a Paurusheya Shabda Praman. And it's sprinkled in there along with the Paurusheya Shabda Praman, and innocent devotees hear it. And then they start to believe it because it came from someone they think, oh, they're a nice speaker. I don't want to go into this topic further. It's kind of an uncomfortable topic. But it's inoculation, because it has a tendency, not only from internet, but it has a tendency to go on. I'm requesting, be cautious, be circumspect. Can we finish? How much?
Just one last thing.
Okay, one last thing. Thank you.
Looks like it's connected. I'll just ask anyway, Guru Maharaj. So, is cultivating a habit of verifying whether what I hear exists in scriptures while hearing, is that habit healthy?
Yeah, I do it all the time. It's healthy. Yes. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.